Hello, welcome to Liberty Wolf, episode number 22. My name is Zach Strong. I created this podcast. If you're new, welcome. I hope that you will enjoy what you hear, and I hope that you'll go back and listen to the previous episodes that I've produced. And I hope that you'll give this channel a subscribe and a like if you enjoy the content. Now, today I have a few comments about the State of the Union address from last week from President Trump, and also how that dovetails with the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is something I don't think people know a lot about. Before I start that, you might hear some beeps in the background. As I mentioned a couple episodes ago, I'm recording in a different location than I have in the past, and there are more distractions and noises, and so I apologize for that. So you'll just have to bear with me. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the State of the Union. I thought this was President Donald Trump's best State of the Union so far. I thought he was very on point with a lot of the things he said. I didn't agree with everything, such as supporting such as his support for the NAFTA 2.0, the USMCA. I don't think that's a good thing at all. You can find a lot of really great information on the USMCA from The New American. Go to thenewamerican.com. They have some fantastic articles explaining what's really in the bill. And it's not good. Now, what I do want to praise, though, is Donald Trump's use of the word socialism. One of the things he's done that's been different than other presidents in recent times is that he's actually called out socialism. He's actually brought the word into play. Other presidents in the past would not do that. So whatever you think of President Trump, he should be given props for bringing it into the conversation. Because, I've written 2 books, and I have a Facebook page devoted to this, and I have articles, and it's been my bread and butter for years trying to get people to realize that communism, and socialism is just communism with a smiley face, that communism is the world's greatest threat. Bar none. It is by far the most evil philosophy ever to exist, by far the most destructive philosophy and system ever to invade this planet. There are people enslaved all over the world under communist regimes still. Our own government here in the United States has adopted all 10 planks, to lesser or greater degree, of the Communist Manifesto. And there's not one government on earth that is free from socialism. And so I do give President Trump kudos for mentioning socialism. Now, he said this, and to me this was the high point of the State of the Union address last week. He said this, quote, 132 lawmakers in this room have endorsed legislation to impose a socialist takeover of our healthcare system, wiping out the private health insurance plans of 180 million very happy Americans. To those watching at home tonight, I want you to know, we will never let socialism destroy American healthcare. Close quote. That was what President Donald Trump said. Now, to me, I thought that was so telling that one half of the room, the Republican half, stood up and cheered and applauded and clapped. The other half, the Democrat side, they sat there silent. Now, isn't that just completely telling about who they really are? That he says, we will never let socialism destroy American healthcare, and they don't applaud that? Why? Why wouldn't they applaud that? Well, they're socialists. That's why they don't applaud that. He's saying, we're not going to let you people do it. Now, they already more or less have destroyed healthcare in America. It's become very socialized, though not to the extent, thank God, as in Europe and other countries. But we're going down that road, unfortunately. However, it is great to see the president actually verbalizing his opposition. And I think that will embolden some people to speak out against socialism as well. Love or hate Donald Trump, the one thing that he's done great is that he has emboldened other people to speak out and take a stand. As Rush Limbaugh says, he has showed people that you don't have to be scared of the media, that you don't have to kowtow to the media and try to appease the media. You can just say the truth. Who cares what the media reacts to it? Who cares? Say the truth, and that's it. And so that is a great thing. Now, again, when he said we will never allow socialism to destroy American healthcare, half of the room there in the Capitol building, half of the room sat down, didn't applaud, looked angry and upset. Again, that's because they're socialists. Actually, they don't like to call themselves socialists. Bernie Sanders is one of the only ones who openly embraces the socialist label. But the others are socialist in principle. And many of them belong to organizations that are socialist. I want to mention two today: the Congressional Progressive Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, these two groups are basically openly Marxist organizations within Congress. I want to quote from Trevor Loudon. He's an Australian, I believe, and he's a wonderful researcher on communism. And he has openly said that in order to defeat communism, we have to do it here in the United States. He said most of the world has already succumbed to it, but the United States is the last place that can resist it. And so he focuses on trying to help wake Americans up to the fact that we're being invaded and taken over and conquered by this socialist communist cancer. Now, he said this. I'm just going to quote two little paragraphs from an article titled "Congressional Progressive Caucus has extensive ties to Marxist organizations." This is back in 2018, November 26, if you want to look it up. And he said this, quote, "The Congressional Progressive Caucus is by far the largest and most influential coalition in the federal government. It is also the most radical, having extensive ties to several major Marxist organizations. Buoyed by an influx of new far-left members, the caucus has struck a deal with Democratic House Leader Nancy Pelosi to significantly increase socialist power in the U.S. House of Representatives." Close quote. Now you can see his article and his other research at his website, trevorloudon.com. That's Loudon. But I just quote that as an introduction. It is the largest caucus, the largest group, the largest coalition in the Congress, in the federal government. How many members does the Congressional Progressive Caucus have? If you look over the years, you'll see different numbers, and you'll notice that it's rising rapidly. Well, I just went and counted on their website how many members they have. They have 97 listed. So how many members of Congress are there in total? There are 535, right? 100 members of those are obviously the Senate. 435 are congressmen in the representatives in the House of Representatives. Of those 435, 96 belong to the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Only one member of that caucus is a senator, and that would be, you guessed it, Bernie Sanders. But in total, they have 97 members. That's almost 1/4 of all the members in the House of Representatives. So almost 1/4 of the members in the U.S. House belong to an openly Marxist organization called the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Yet, how many people have ever heard of the Congressional Progressive Caucus? I don't think the average person could even tell you what it is. Probably has never heard of it. And who are some of the members of this caucus? Well, do you remember the squad? The so-called squad of those 4 colored dafty women who were elected in 2018, right? Led by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and also included Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib. So those 4, they are also members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. No big surprise there, right? I mean, these people were elected largely through the help of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders really helped get the Congressional Progressive Caucus going. He's one of the founding members. And so naturally, they'd gravitate towards those who were completely batty, completely out of their mind, completely openly socialist, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Now, other members, let me pull up the list here. Other members include people like, what's her name? ran for president. Gabbard. Yeah, Tulsi Gabbard. She's one of the members. You just have a whole list. Most of these people you've never heard of before, so I won't go over them. But you can find the list on their website. And like I said, it's 97 people. It's quite extensive. Now, this group is in cahoots with another group, the Congressional Black Caucus. The Congressional Black Caucus has been around a lot longer. They were created in 1971. Oh, the Congressional Progressive Caucus was created in 1991, which is curious since that's the year supposedly the Soviet Union fell. It's been, I've tried so hard to get people to realize the Soviet Union never fell. Communism is not dead. And the West did not win the Cold War. Until we learn this and realize this and wake up to this fact, we will never win our fight against the communists. Period. It's not going to happen. I mean, how many Soviet defectors did it take to warn us that, hey, the Soviet Union is going to fake a collapse in order to fool you people? And how many times do Soviet leaders like Gorbachev have to write books saying, of course we didn't fall. In fact, we're embracing greater socialism and going back to our roots of Leninism. And he wrote that in a book. And yet the West still believes communism died? That somehow Ronald Reagan won the Cold War? No. Folks, communism has never been more powerful and prevalent than ever before. And the fact that this progressive, which is another term for communist, it's the same thing, communist, socialist, liberal, Fabian socialist, all these various terms, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, it all means the same thing. They all hold to the same identical principles. Government domination of your life. It's total statism. It's collectivism. All of these philosophies believe in the same set of principles, regardless of their outward appearance and name. So anyhow, the Congressional Black Caucus was created in 1971. They were openly praised by the Soviet government. They actually would meet with Soviet representatives. They'd come over and meet with the Congressional Black Caucus. The Congressional Black Caucus has over 50 members. And here, I'm going to quote from the Communist Party USA's website. This is back from November 26th, 2018. This is after the election where the squad I just mentioned was elected. Okay, here's something that the Communist Party USA said in their article, A History-Making, Unity-Building Election. They said, quote, in counterpoint to the rise of racist terror under Trump, 9 of the new Congressional Black Congress members were elected from districts where the majority of the population is white. For the first time, the Congressional Black Caucus is over 50 members. Now, close quote. Now, if you add those two together, right? I mean, there's a little bit of overlap. There are some members of the Congressional Black Caucus who are also members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. However, but not all. There are actually quite a few that are not. So when you add them together, it's well over 100 members of Congress belong to 2 openly Marxist organizations. It literally is 1/4 of congressional members that are openly Marxist or that openly belong to Marxist organizations. Organizations that have the support and praise of not only the Soviet government in the past, but the current Communist Party USA. This should be very, very revealing and telling to people. It should startle them to realize that our government has just been slowly taken over and infiltrated by avowed communists. People want to talk about McCarthyism, oh, Red Scare. No, McCarthy was actually wrong. He didn't go far enough. He was correct that our government has been infiltrated by communists, but he didn't understand to what extent we were taken over and infiltrated. J. Edgar Hoover understood, and so he was demonized by the communists, and today he is still demonized because he dared sound the warning voice against communism. He was often called the most informed man in Washington on the communist conspiracy. It's probably true. He just had massive files of people who were communists, and he had all the evidence to back it up. For example, we know through his files that Martin Luther King Jr. was a Marxist. I mean, I've talked about all this in both of my books. I've written articles about how he was a plagiarizer and a liar and a philanderer and adulterer. So, don't believe me right now. Go, if you don't believe me, go read my books. I have it all documented. The whole point is this. The communist conspiracy, which is the most evil, wicked, perverse, murderous, ravenous, tyrannical, satanic movement in world history, is still alive, and it's still working to conquer this country. If anything, they've actually increased the pace at which they're going. If you read their writings, Lenin's writings, for example, if you read the early communist writings, they openly said that, we're going to have to work differently in the United States and in certain other countries in Europe than we can in, Russia, for example, China, different places. China, Russia, they never had any semblance of freedom. Their institutions were not strong. That's why they were so easily conquered. But the United States has strong institutions, strong families, reliance on God. And so they knew we were going to have to go slowly. We were going to have to corrupt their institutions from the inside, make them rotten. And then we'll be able to conquer them. They knew they couldn't just launch a revolution and conquer the United States. It would never happen. So they wanted to go slowly from the inside. Now, I get arguments with people sometimes, including some famous people that you might know the names of if I mentioned, who think that globalism, so-called, I don't like the term globalism. It's too vague. What does globalism actually mean? I mean, it doesn't tell you who the people actually are. Anyhow, that globalists are really Fabian socialists. Well, who are Fabian socialists? They're communists. They believed in the principles that Marx espoused in the Communist Manifesto. And again, the Fabians want to go slowly, work from the inside. Okay, that's what the Soviet Union said to do with the United States, to go slowly from the inside. People try to separate these two movements, Fabian socialism on one hand, communism on the other, but you can't. They're part and parcel. They're the same thing. It's part of the same conspiracy. Ezra Tepinson once wrote a book called The Red Carpet, Socialism, the Royal Road to Communism. That's the name. Fantastic. One of the best books you will ever read on socialism, communism. And he said the great danger is to fight Fabian socialism right now because they're as busy as bees rolling out the red carpet for communism. So the reason I harp on communism is because that's the end goal of Fabian socialism, of all other types of socialism. Socialism is just one stepping stone towards full out communism. You could also call it state capitalism if you wanted to. Lenin referred to state capitalism, and he actually chided people for not supporting state capitalism. Isn't that interesting? But Vladimir Lenin, the arch communist, he supported capitalism. Yes, state capitalism. And he said in the United States, you have to support state capitalism because you can't take them over any other way. He said, we're going to get the capitalists to work on our side and help fund their own destruction. He said it over and over again, many different ways, yet people still think that the so-called monopoly capitalists here are different. No, they're working for the same worldwide conspiracy to centralize power in the hands of a small world elite who believes in the principles of communism. And so these people have worked hard to get their dupes, their stooges into Congress and positions of authority. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Squad, Maxine Waters, Cory Booker, the latter two there, as well as Hakeem Jeffries and others. Kamala Harris. Those last four I mentioned, they're members of the Congressional Black Caucus. So they're communists. Then you add those to the squad. And then Bernie Sanders. And in total, well over 100 members of Congress are openly Marxist. But communism's dead? Really? You know, I say thank God that Donald Trump actually mentions the word socialism. Because with Bernie Sanders almost in the lead among the Democrats, I mean, Buttigieg is supposedly in the lead, but it's a statistical tie right now. We'll see what happens today in New Hampshire. But with Bernie Sanders, an open and avowed and admitted socialist who honeymooned in Soviet Russia, literally, who visited Castro and others, you know, he loved the communists. He loved Bolshevism. That's why I call him Bolshevik Bernie. So with him towards the forefront, he's bringing socialism right there. And so now you have Donald Trump openly denouncing socialism. So that's why I hope Bernie Sanders wins the Democratic Party nomination. I wrote an article on my website, theamericancitadel.com, saying I hope Bernie Sanders wins. And I went through my rationale that I hope that he wins the Democratic Party nomination so that the Democrats can no longer hide behind other words like, oh, we're just progressive or liberals or moderates. No, you're socialist, communist, Marxist. And if they nominate Bernie Sanders, which I hope they do, then they will not be able to hide anymore. The mask will be completely ripped off. Everyone will know they are socialists. And then, once that acknowledgement is finally made that we're at war with socialism, communism, then finally we can mobilize and fight. Because unless we make that connection, unless we acknowledge and admit that communism is the enemy, we will never win. Because how can you defeat an enemy unless you know who that enemy is? You can't. You can't do it. Just kind of like the bogus war on terror. Like, what's a war on terror? That's an idea. It's just like, so, yeah. Anyway, that's a whole different tangent. But this, you can pin down, say, people who believe in X, Y, Z, these principles right here, they're communists, they're the enemy, they're enemies to the Constitution. What they believe in is antithetical to the principles that made America great, the principles that undergird our republic. So when people finally realize it's not the Democrats that are the enemy, it's the Marxists. Now, many of the Marxists are Democrats. Some are also Republicans. Both sides are wrong. And Donald Trump, I don't support him either. He's the best president of my lifetime, but I still don't. I'm not going to vote for him. He has too many principles that I don't agree with. So again, we need to make this about principles. So when people belong to an organization that espouses certain principles, like the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, then you can openly say, yes, these people who belong to these anti-American, anti-Constitution, anti-Christian organizations, they are the enemy. Once you do that, then you can finally mobilize against them. If you can't defeat an enemy, you can't identify. So let's identify them. And so I just want to end again with quoting from Donald Trump, his State of the Union address last Tuesday. He said, quote, "Socialism destroys nations, but always remember, freedom unifies the soul." So socialism destroys nations. And so it does. Let's acknowledge the true enemy. Let's mobilize and let's fight against him. So I close this as I always do. Sic semper tyrannis. Long live liberty.